This is the partial review for Test 5, a review of commonly missed problems. Number 1, find the domain for g of x equals 5 over 1 minus 7x. The domain means all the values of x that will work, that not necessarily make it true, but will be allowed. In other words, the value of x does not result in an undefined value. In this case, there is a value of x that will make this function g of x undefined, and that is that whatever value makes the denominator equal to 0, because division by 0 is undefined. So, let's set the denominator equal to 0 so that we can find that value. 1 plus 7x, 1 minus 7x. For the denominator, 1 minus 7x equals 0. We solve this equation. We subtract 1 from both sides, and then we divide both sides by negative 7, and that gets the x by itself. And negative 1 over negative 7 equals 1/7. So x cannot be 1/7, or this function will be undefined. All other values of x will work. So we look at A, x is a real number and x does not equal 5. Now x can equal 5, and that's no problem. B, the domain is that x is a real number and x does not equal 1/7. Well, that is exactly what we said, so we'll circle that. C, x is a real number and x is greater than or equal to 1/7. Well, x can be greater than 1/7, but it cannot be equal to 1/7, so C doesn't work. D, x is a real number and x equals 0. Well, x can equal 0. If x equals 0, then the denominator becomes 1, and that's no trouble. And E, x is a real number, any real number, and that isn't true because 1/7 is a real number, and we know that x cannot equal 1/7. So B is the correct answer to this problem. Number 2, find f of negative 1, f of 0, and f of 1 in the function graph below. Well, remember, f of something means f of x. Let's look at x equals 1. Here is x equals 1 all the way up and down that line. So when we go up, when we find where the graph crosses x equals 1, it's that point. And at x equals, negative 1, when x equals negative 1, what does f of x equal? Well, f of x is y, and y equals 8. So that tells us that f of x, when x is negative 1, or y, when x is negative 1, y is equal to 8. F of 0, same thing. We go to where x equals 0, and look, that's exactly where the graph crosses the x-axis and also the y-axis. So y is 0 when x is 0, and f of 1, when x is 1, y is negative 8, so f of 1 is negative 8. And that's all there is to that problem. Find the slope of 10, negative 3, and 4, negative 8. In other words, those are points, and we are to find the slope. Well, if you remember, the formula for the slope is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And so it doesn't matter which are x1 and y1, but let's go ahead and label them. I'm going to label them this way. So substituting in, we get m equals y2, which is negative 8, minus y1, which is negative 3, over x2, which is 4, minus x1, which is 10. Okay, minus a negative is plus a positive. So we have in our numerator, negative 8 plus 3 is negative 5, and 4 minus 10 is negative 6, and a negative divided by a negative is a positive 5/6. So the answer is that m equals 5/6. In number 4, we are to find the domain of p of x when p of x equals x squared minus 7. Okay, every value you plug in for x will be positive in this function. And also, there is no denominator other than 1 in this function. So the function really will have all real numbers open to it because there is nothing that can make that denominator equal to 0. So our solution is E, x is any real number. Number 5 tells us to write an equation of the line containing the given point and perpendicular to the given line. In other words, we're given a line 7x plus y equals 6, and we are told to find a second line, and the second line is perpendicular to the first line. Now, what we know about perpendicular lines is that if you are given a line with a certain slope, the perpendicular line will have the negative reciprocal of the first line's slope. That means we need to find the slope of the given line here. That's our first job. So we rewrite 7x plus y equals 6 into y equals something, and we do that by isolating y. Y equals negative 7x plus 6. That is in the y equals mx plus b format. So we know that m equals negative 7. Or we could write it negative 7 over 1. Now, if they just asked you for your slope, you wouldn't want to enter your answer negative 7 over 1 because they'll count it wrong. They want it simplified. Your answer would be negative 7. But the reason I'm writing it as a fraction now is because I want to take the reciprocal of the fraction to find my second slope, which is perpendicular. So I do two things. I flip the first fraction to be negative 1/7, and I change the sign. So I take the negative reciprocal, which is going to be positive 1/7. At this point, I don't care what that first line is. I found the slope, and now I'm working on my second line so I can ignore the first line. Now I have a slope of 1/7 and a point 5/6, so I use the point slope formula. Y minus y1 equals m x minus x1. Plug in my point and my slope. Y minus y1 is 6 equals m is 1/7 times x minus 5. And then I simplify this. Y minus 6 equals 1/7 x minus, I'm going to change my 5 to 5 over 1 times 1 over 7, distributing that 1/7. And that way I can multiply fractions. Y minus 6 equals 1/7 x minus 5/7. Now I have to add 6 to both sides. Y equals 1/7 x minus 5/7 plus 6, which I'm going to write as a fraction. So now I need to combine my like terms, which are minus 5/7 plus 6 over 1. And to do that, I need a common denominator. And so my 6 over 1, I'm going to multiply that by 7 over 7 because my common denominator will be 7. So now I have y equals 1/7 x minus 5/7 plus 6 times 7 is 42/7. So now I can combine negative 5/7 and positive 42/7. That's supposed to be a little dash there and a 7 because I have the same denominator. So I can write y equals 1/7 x and combine my denominators and my numerators. Minus 5/7 plus 42/7 is plus 37/7. And there isn't a common factor in 37 or 7, so that is a reduced fraction, and that is my answer for the second line. Y equals 1/7 x plus 37/7. Number 7, we're given a graph and we're told to find the value of f of 3. Well, remember, that means f of x, so x equals 3. So x equals 3 at this point. What does f of 3 or y equal at that point? Well, the graph here crosses x equals 3, and we trace it over and see that y equals -2. So f of 3 is -2. Okay, the domain is all of the values of x in which this graph exists. So if you'll notice, the graph goes to infinity in both directions. So x can go all the way to -infinity and to positive infinity. So the domain x is all real numbers. Okay, the range, and that should be the range. Let's skip down to the range since we're talking about that. What does y exist in this graph? Well, y goes into an infinity up in both directions, but it only goes down as far as y equals -2. So y can equal -2 and y can be greater than -2. So number 2 says y is such that y can be greater than or equal to number 2. So that is the range. Now let's go back to C and find any x values for which f of x equals 4. In other words, where does y equal 4? And y equals 4 right here, and it looks like x is equal to 0 when y equals 4. And it isn't equal to 4 in two places. Sometimes you'll get a graph that crosses the y-axis in two places, although if y crosses the graph in two places, then it wouldn't be a function. And that's it for number 6. Let's look at number 7. Okay, for the function in this graph, what is the domain? The domain is all values that are allowed to be x. And since the graph goes in both directions to infinity, that means it goes all the way to -infinity and all the way to positive infinity, and so the domain is all real numbers. What is the value of x for f of x equals 4? Well, remember, f of x is the same as y, so let's find y equals 4. It's right here, and then x is going to be over here and over here. Not that great of an example. Let's see if we can change that to f of x equals 8, because it crosses the x-axis at a nice place there. So when y equals 8, we see that x equals -1, and x equals, we'll say 3.3. It's something above 3. So the x value for f of x equals 3.3 is -1, and 3.3 when y equals 8. You won't get one with a decimal, you'll get one that crosses the line exactly. What is the range? The range is the values that the graph goes through on y. And since the graph goes from -infinity and then loops around but then goes to positive infinity, y is also all real numbers.